Is it recording? Can you see if it's
Well,
recording, Shane?
I just heard the Majel Barrett voice saying recording in progress. So I think that's a green light.
All right, here we are on The Blind Man in Black. I'm your host, Brian Snyder. My voice is cracking. And
that's what I heard earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what?
I said puberty.
Yeah. So if you, oh, wow, I really am going through puberty. Excuse me. So if you like the show, rate, subscribe, review, it helps. And this is a really special show. This is number 50. California is on fire. The Delta variant is in play, and things don't look good, but I'm feeling pretty good today because I'm here with my brother. And should I announce you as the blind man? What are you wearing?
Nothing. I'm not wearing anything.
He's the naked blind man.
That's me. Yeah.
Well, welcome to the show, Shane. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me, and congratulations on your 50th episode.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a crazy. It's become an obsession now, and I'd like to also introduce my wife, Rachel Snyder. She's going to be co-hosting here.
When did you get married?
Did we?
Are you already going through that phase where
it's early, very early
onset?
Dementia? VED. I've got VED. Very early dementia.
Yeah, I feel like that too. How you doing, Rachel?
I'm good. I was just thinking up sitcom ideas for the Snyders, the two Snyder brothers and Rachel. I feel like we have something already.
Wow, that's the first time I've actually heard that, the Snyder brothers, in context, not in relation to Bob and Ken Snyder.
Right, but to you two. You are also Snyder brothers. It's true.
The cycle continues. So yeah, I'm really honored to have you here because this is I'm excited to be able to learn about you in a different way, in a different context, and I wanted Rachel to be here because I mean she kind of sees us in a different way, and I know she'll have a different perspective to be able to ask questions that maybe I'm not thinking about, and so I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And let me start by asking you, how are you holding together, Shane, through COVID?
Well, I think all things considered, I've done very well. I feel fortunate that my work has continued. I have not been out of work, and the organization I work for has had some financial challenges, but we've come through it very well. And I have a place to live that's comfortable and secure and quiet and private.
It's Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. It's right next door. Yeah. In fact, the Donald and I are going to play 9 rounds, 9 holes on Saturday. Yeah,
that would be really interesting to see how you would both interact. I wonder how that would go.
I'd say, oh, that Donald Trump. I like him. He's a neat guy.
So everybody that is listening and watching, that impression that Shane just did was our grandmother Betty on our mother's side. And can you share the story behind that?
He left.
Yes, I can. So our grandmother, our mother's mother, Betty Heisenrader, was a larger than life character. She did a lot of different.
I don't want to interrupt you.
I just dropped the phone. One moment, folks. Sorry about that. I heard something thump.
Yeah, it was. We were getting the back of your thigh.
Well, that's one of my better angles, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if he's naked, that would reveal.
we could have drawn a little face on it and then it would have worked great.
How's that?
Very good. Perfect.
Okay.
All right,
All right.
go on.
Sorry about that, folks.
It's okay.
Yeah. So, Betty Heisenrader did a lot of different things in her life, and her last job that she held for, 10, 15 years, I think, was as a park ranger for Yosemite National Park. She worked at the South Gate, admitting visitors and collecting fees, and she was a beloved personality. She was very congenial. She was a great hostess. So that was a perfect job for her because she was all smiles and very warm and generous. That was the persona that she assumed very nicely for that job. But she could be different in her private life, and I won't go into that right now. But what brought this story on was just
Well, put it in the context. What time period was this?
Well, I believe that sometime, let's see, I would say sometime in the late 80s, I was visiting her down in Oakhurst, where she lives. I was staying at her house, and when she would get home from work, she would sit in her recliner and she'd watch TV. And one of her favorite shows in the afternoon, I think it came on like around 4:30, was the Merv Griffin Show. And at that time, Donald Trump, who at that time was wheeling and dealing in New York real estate, and this was before he was a TV reality star, but he was already a well-known personality in New York and around the country, around the world. And so he was on Merv Griffin, and Merv was interviewing him, and Betty was, watching this in rapt attention. And then she just said, "Oh, that Donald Trump, I like him. He's a neat guy."
And I want you guys to know that as you're telling stories, I'm holding up photos of Betty for.
Perfect. Yeah.
For those that are listening on Apple Podcasts, what does she look like?
Oh, well, the picture.
Go ahead, Rachel.
The picture I was showing was of her at Yosemite in her later years, and she's got extremely curly white hair and her uniform on, and she's smiling in greeting. It was a newspaper article about Yosemite. But I do have older photos of her as well, when she was a raven-haired beauty for sure, that I can also share. But by all means, go on, and I'll do the video montage or the photos.
Did you want a screen share? Do you have them on your computer?
I have them on my iPad, and I'm holding them up to the.
Okay. All right. By the way, what does Shane look like for those on Apple Podcast?
Just like Betty.
Yeah, uniform,
curly white hair, and all big toothy smile. Yeah,
like Henry Rollins, I would say.
Now, do you have a beard?
As of yesterday morning, no, I shaved it off yesterday morning. I'm clean shaven tonight for the first time in 15, 16 months.
I thought we talked about this. I said you got to have the beard.
Well, I'll do my best to have a beard for my next appearance on your show.
Why did you shave it off?
Well, because yesterday I had to go into work and I had to have a professional photograph taken for work.
Oh.
And I've been trimming the beard with scissors with my beard trimmer on my electric razor. And I've been soliciting feedback from different people. And I just wasn't quite getting it rightly proportioned, right? I mean, it was fine for, COVID shut in and walking around the neighborhood and doing my everyday thing. But this was a work photograph that's going to be distributed to a lot of people, right? And I was fussing with the fussing with the beard yesterday morning, and I just thought, you know, I'm just not confident that what I've done is looks okay, right? For that. So I just started shaving. I just started shaving it off, and so here I am.
And now he looks like
Baby-faced again.
Henry Rollins.
Yes.
Who's Henry Rollins?
He was the lead singer of a punk band called Black Flag, and then he did a bunch of spoken word after that.
Oh
He does a bunch
yeah.
of-
You mentioned that before. Yeah.
He wrote a book called Get in the
mentioned-
Van about touring, and yeah,
Right.
there's a good similarity for sure. Yeah, Henry Rollins.
Well, that's better than Don Knotts or.
Yeah, it could be worse. For sure.
That's funny that you mentioned Don Knotts, because Rachel does the Don Knotts sniff.
I do not.
Oh,
Yeah, she does that. Like, yeah, I'm doing real good right now. You know, she's got that Don Knotts
like
sniff.
just snorted a couple of lines of coke.
Yeah.
Kind of sniff.
Yeah, it's
but
the Don Knotts. It's the I'm pretty cool sniff.
Oh, okay. All right. I wasn't aware of that affectation on his part.
He used to do it a lot on Three's Company, and he did it a lot in what the hell was the Mayberry show called? Andy Griffith show?
Yeah, he did it
yeah.
before he's about to brag about something or about to like lay down something. Yeah, well, you know.
Yeah, that's what Rachel does a lot.
Around here, like that kind of thing.
I'm married to Don Knotts.
He had a lot of characteristic mannerisms, and some of them I remember, but gosh, it's been so long since I have seen him in anything, or even heard him in anything, right?
Is he alive? I'm not sure he's alive.
No, he's gone.
No,
Okay.
he's
So let's start at the beginning.
well, particle physicists speculate, hypothesize that 13.8 billion years ago. You don't want me to go that far back.
If you were involved in 13 something billion years ago, then yes, we can talk about it.
Well, I might have been. We all might have been, right?
Right. Because we're made of the stars.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We were all there, and we're still there.
Right. Doing the exact same thing over and over again.
I do have your senior portrait to show, but I think that he wants to go back a little farther than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go back to the genesis of
the
Shane.
Senior portrait. I think that was one of my pro shots, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Medium pro. Yeah.
And let me guess. Can I guess? Because I feel like I remember it. So he's wearing a white collared shirt with a blue sweater. Am I close?
Well, it's black and white, so I can't tell what color sweater is, but yes.
Well, actually, the one that went in the high school yearbook was actually me in a white shirt, blazer, and tie. So I had what? You're right, Brian. I had 2 outfits, and photos were taken of both. And the more casual one was me with my arms folded over, like I think it was a railing or something, in the studio, like a wooden, like a fence post, like a fence railing, and yeah, baby blue V-neck sweater maybe, and a shirt with a collar underneath.
That's what I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Mom probably had that.
It's all black and white, so it's hard
Yeah.
to tell, but
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go back. Where are you born?
I was born in Hayward, California, at St. Rose Hospital on October 17th, 1965. And I don't remember Hayward. We only lived there about a year before Mom and Dad and Gam, our grandmother, Gammy, Dad's mother, bought a duplex in Dublin in the East Bay, in the far East Bay, and Mom and Dad and I took up residence on one side of the duplex, and Gam in the other, and there was also an extra bedroom on her side. And sometimes Dad's brother, Uncle Ken, would stay there. He had a bedroom, and he would come and go. Sometimes live there. So
was that house green?
Yeah, it was. It was kind of a pastel minty green with white trim.
Yeah, I remember going there. I remember I have memories of it. And but they're not very clear. But what was it like in the early years? I know that Mom said that I like attacked you with some kind of I don't know, it was like some kind of toy or something.
Attacked me?
Yeah, like I knocked you over the head with it.
Well, I don't remember that. And of course,
Oh.
that what folks need to know is that you came along 12 years after me. So there's quite a gap in age between us. So yeah, there were a lot of years where I was, an only child, right? And in Dublin. And of course, in the early years, Dad traveled for work. And sometimes before I started kindergarten, I and Mom would go on the road with him and Ken. And we lived in Las Vegas for a while. In 1968, Dad and Ken did a show on the Strip at the Desert Inn called Pizzazz. And I think that was for about a year. And we had an apartment in Vegas. And I some of my earliest memories are of that apartment in Vegas, back in 1968.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were in Dublin, and I started kindergarten in Dublin. And then in the second grade, between the second and third grade, Mom and Dad had started building a house up in Nevada City on property they had purchased a few years earlier. And then the summer between second and third grade, we moved up there. And so
now, do you know the story behind how the blueprints of that house were acquired?
No, but I'll tell you one thing, because what you just said triggered a memory. I remember that we toured a model of that design somewhere in the Bay Area. I don't know where it was. Maybe it was the Bay Area. Maybe it was in Sacramento, for all I know. But a half-built version of that same house, we walked through it, right? And I presume that the blueprints had some connection to that visit.
Yes. What happened was the blueprints were
Dad
in the
stole
house.
Them? He stole them?
Well, let me tell you the story. So Dad made Mom go back at night wearing black and go into the house and get the blueprints.
He sent her rather than go himself.
Yeah, I think he waited in the car or something.
I've never heard that story.
Yeah, he made her go and do that.
Ever. Huh?
He made her do it.
Yeah, well, it sounds just like him, but I can't believe I've never, ever heard that story.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually just learned a few years ago about that.
And did he explain why he was sending her instead of him?
I don't know. We'd have to ask Mom why that was. I don't think he wanted to go.
Wow. Wow. So he had
maybe he thought he was going to get caught. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was willing to let her get caught and arrested.
Yeah.
But not himself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That sounds like Bob.
Yeah. So what was it like? What was the
classic? That's classic Bob.
Yeah. What were the early years? Because I didn't know Bob and Judith at that time. I wasn't born yet. So what were those years like in Vegas and traveling with them?
Well, for the most part, what I remember is him being gone a lot, right? Because yes, there was Vegas that year in '68, and but when they were in Vegas, they were traveling all over the place, right? All over California and Nevada and sometimes Washington, Oregon. And a lot of times we were not on the road with them. Sometimes we were, we'd stay in a hotel or an apartment for a while. Other times we didn't, right? So what I remember early on a lot was it being just mom and me, right? And the other thing was that when he did shows, they were late at night, right? Sometimes very late. He might not get home till 2 a.m, right?
Well, let's clarify, because we're not being specific. For everybody listening and watching, he was not a stripper. He was a comedian, and he had an act with his brother, our uncle Ken.
Yeah. So they were the Snyder Brothers, and they were a music comedy duo. And Dad was the straight man of the two. He would come out and sing popular songs of the day, pop songs, country songs, everything from Johnny Cash to Merle Haggard to Tony Bennett to Sinatra to Perry Como. And usually while he was singing these songs straight and beautifully, because he had a beautiful voice, and he used to say that what they did were impressions, right? He would do impressions of these great singers and sing their songs and sing like them, and even a lot of times sound like them. And his brother, or our Uncle Ken, was this brilliantly funny and creative physical comedian, who had wild curly hair and bug eyes and very expressive face and body. And while Dad would sing these songs pretty much straight, he would come out and do these various wacky, sometimes kind of surreal sketches in the background, and then in between they would converse and tell jokes, and that was the act. And it was a great act. It was really unique and funny, and they were very successful.
Yeah, and I should note that, or state, not note, but that Bob was friends with Lenny Bruce.
Right.
They worked together at Ann's 440 in San Francisco during that time. And the first time Lenny Bruce met Bob, he said to him, "You look like a rabbinical student." That was the first thing Lenny Bruce said to Bob. And
because he was so clean cut and boyish, or
something like that. Yeah. I mean, the way it was about how he was dressed. He just looked like, like he was studying to be a rabbi. So,
okay.
But, and it's interesting, though, because Lenny Bruce's real name is Schneider. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
SCHNEI.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is actually would be our proper spelling.
Yeah. We were Schneiders 12 generations ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Before it was Americanized.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, they, so what was it like? I mean, you actually were able to see them perform. I mean, I didn't get any opportunity. I have one memory of them practicing on the House on Banner in Nevada City. That's it. One memory. And it was the memory of, I remember seeing all the instruments laid out on the floor of the family room. And then Ken did his three-legged man dance. And that's all I remember.
Yeah. I did see them. And I have vivid memories of the act. And I saw the act enough that there were a lot of numbers that I knew by heart. I knew the words to the songs by heart, and I knew the jokes by heart. So it was a wonderful act, and it was, quick paced, and the timing was always razor sharp. And a lot of times they had a band accompanying them, right? So
Mhm.
they would go on the road with a band, and they, had live music, and yeah, it was wonderful. It was really a great act. And I remember, once when I think I was 6, 7 years old, they went on a road trip and down the central southern coast of California, and the stops were Santa Maria, San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, LA. And it was that tour that's referenced in that YouTube video that one of the band members' kids put together. And it included Super 8 footage of the act, and also some cassette audio that's not in sync with the video footage, but nevertheless, it's really gives you a nice flavor of what they look like and what they sounded like. And I remember that tour really clearly. I remember some of the apartments we stayed in, because it was several weeks, that maybe even several months. I don't know exactly how long it lasted, but and it was probably during the summer, because if that's the thing, is once I started school, I didn't go on the road with them because I was in school. So they would be on the road, and I would be with mom at home and at school, right?
Mhm.
And if we traveled, it would be in the summer. And in fact, the summer after, we moved up to Nevada City between second and third grade, 1974, and third grade. Was it the summer before fourth grade? Doesn't really matter. But Dad and Ken got booked as the headline act for a club called the Holiday Casino on the Strip in Vegas, dead center, right in the heart of all the action. It was across the street from Caesar's Palace, and in between the Sands Hotel, which is very famous, and the Flamingo Hilton, and also across the street next to Caesar's was the Dunes Hotel and Casino. So it was right smack in the middle, and it was a smaller club. It had a riverboat theme. So the casino and showroom was a Mississippi style riverboat, and then it was attached to a hotel tower that was a Holiday Inn. So it was the Holiday Inn's casino and showroom, and they were the headline act there for 8 years straight, I think. Because we joined them 4 summers. I remember, so like I said, I think the summer after third grade, summer after fourth grade, summer after fifth grade, and then you were born that year, 1978. And we did not go to Vegas the summer after you were born. I think Mom and I stayed home in Nevada City because you were so small. And then the next summer, which was
And I ruined
summer
it.
after. What's that?
I ruined it.
Yeah, you ruined everything.
Yeah.
Everything just started.
It's an exclusive here.
Yeah,
On the
everything
Blind
just
Man in
started
Black.
spiraling down when you entered the picture. Yeah, that's right.
Wow. I'm showing footage while you talk, Shane, of the YouTube video, and they're doing something really weird. I don't know what they're doing.
What does it look like?
Well, they're really close face to face, and Ken's got something in his mouth he's doing some weird phallic thing with something in his mouth.
Phallic thing with the microphone?
It's not a microphone. It looks like a hot dog or a whistle, or I don't know what it is.
Yeah, they used a lot of props. He would use the microphone stand. He would one of their numbers was Dad would sing "I Left My Heart in San Francisco," Tony Bennett.
Yeah.
And that's a slow, beautiful ballad, and he'd sing that, and then Uncle Ken would come out in rubber coveralls and work boots,
right,
and he would take a mic stand and flip it over and collapse it so that it was about waist height. And then he'd hold the stand with both hands. And then he'd flip a switch, a pretend switch on the mic stand. And he was a tap dancer. So he would tap his right foot so that it sounded like a jackhammer, right? And then Dad would stop singing and kind of look at him, in kind of bewilderment and annoyance, right? And then Ken would stop, but when he stopped, his arms and body were still gyrating, because it's like the motion transferred to his body, and it continued, and then his teeth would start to fall out onto the stage. And then everybody would be laughing at this, right? And then Dad would, while they were still laughing and applauding, he would start back in with the song. I left, and he'd laugh and go, I left my heart, and the song would continue, and Ken would stumble off stage, right? So that was one of their bits, right?
And Bob was a straight man, right? Bob was Ken's straight man.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, and what came out of Kenny's mouth were white, what are those? Not pinto beans. What are the white beans?
Tic Tacs?
Well, they were about the size and shape of Tic Tacs. Oh, yeah, some kind of white bean. He'd get a bag of them from Safeway, and he'd put a handful of those in his mouth, and then he'd spit them out, and they looked and sounded like teeth hitting the stage.
So how many of the acts do you remember, the bits?
Well, I'll just run through the ones I remember off the top of my head. I mean, the show, it always started with the three-legged dance. So that was Dad singing Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, and Uncle Ken coming out in a long black raincoat and rubber rain boots. But he would come out and he had 3 legs, 3 identical boots. And the leg was, he had a stick that he would hold between his legs, and he would walk, his gait was such that the middle leg would go out, and then he would swing his 2 legs on either side of it forward, and then swing the middle leg out, and then swing the 2 legs on the side forward, right? And he was a dancer too, so he did this with a lot of grace, right? And
he danced with in Liberace's act, right?
Yeah. Before he and Dad, got together to form their act, Ken was already out there dancing and performing with all kinds of performers. Some of them big stars like Liberace, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they start with the 3-legged dance, and he used to do another one where Uncle Ken, by the way, the joke of the San Francisco thing was when they did that bit where Ken came out with the mic stand as the jackhammer, at that time they were constructing the BART system, and Market Street was torn up from top to bottom, and it was just constant construction, constant jackhammers and detours, and it was a mess for years and years while they put in that system, right? And so that was the joke, just that if you go to San Francisco, you've got to put up with all the construction noise and inconvenience, right? So yeah, their jokes and their bits were timely, right? Like all comedians, they were sourcing events and personalities in real time, right? And the songs they sang were popular at that time, right? Raindrops and Folsom Prison Blues. Johnny Cash was another song they did.
What was the bit around that?
Well, I'll tell you in a second, because before I forget, I wanted to mention they did another bit where Uncle Ken would come out, and it was like he was like a male version of Julia Child. He was a chef, and he would be doing this cooking show, and he'd come out in chef's whites and a chef hat, right? And I forget what the name was. He was Chef something funny, right? Dad, next time you talk to Dad, ask him what the name of Ken's chef character was, right?
Okay.
But so he'd get flour out, and the flour would be flying everywhere in big clouds, and he'd be mixing. He had cooking sherry, and right from the get-go, he'd be swigging the cooking sherry, right? While he talked to Dad, and while he was preparing this dish that involved the rubber chicken, right?
I remember the rubber chicken.
Yeah. So sometime he'd pull he had like a stainless steel mixing bowl, and then the rubber chicken would come out, and it would slip through his hands and fall on the floor, and he'd pick it up and put it back in the bowl, right? And he'd keep swigging this pretend sherry, and then he'd be getting drunk in this process, and he'd start to slur his words, right? And then there was a catchphrase. I don't remember what the joke around this was, but he'd go, "Check them out, check them out." and I know that one thing, when they did the show in Vegas, that bit was in their act for a number of years, and "check them out" became such a buzz phrase. Is that the right word?
Catchphrase?
Yeah, catchphrase. Yeah. It was kind of such a catchphrase that the club, the Holiday Casino, they printed out these T-shirts that said "check them out" on the chest.
Oh, wow.
Which
They
had
should have trademarked that.
Well, yeah, and it was a double entendre, right? Because especially if a woman wore this T-shirt, "check them out,"
Right
on the chest.
Rachel would have worn that.
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, well, you still can. You can have one made.
I actually had a T-shirt that just said no, period.
It's not too late to check them out.
Well, now that they've been bought and paid for, there's something to check out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, there was the chef routine, and the Folsom. In my mind, I still can almost reconstruct the order of all the acts, right? Like I said, I know Raindrops came early, the chef came early. The San Francisco bit was kind of more toward the middle. Then there was another one. Dad would sing Perry Como on a clear day. On a clear day, that kind of.
Are you talking about Robert Goulet?
Oh, Robert Goulet. That's it. Thank you for correcting me. Yeah, it was Robert Goulet.
Right.
But I can't remember the sketch that went with it for some reason. I remember the song, but I can't remember the sketch.
What was your favorite sketch that you think about?
I think the three-legged dance was. Yeah, it was just really lovely to watch, and not only, like I said, his Uncle Ken's grace and his movement and the way he wielded that third leg and in perfect sync with the rest of his body, but he had this incredibly expressive face, right? And every emotion would just radiate from his face, from his eyes, from his mouth, and the expressions were really beautiful to watch, right? And sometimes they were delighted, sometimes they were goofy, sometimes they were, a little like lecherous, right? A little creepy. Because the other thing about the three-legged dance, there's a little bit of a creepiness to it, because when he came out, it kind of reminded you of a flasher, right? That would wear a long coat and kind of be looking around with this kind of funny expression on his face, like looking for somebody to open his coat to. And that wasn't part of the bit, but it kind of had that feel to it. It's like it was funny and sweet and also a little creepy, right? Because just the idea of a guy having a third leg, it's not natural, you know. So
Right.
there was a kind of a creepy element to it, and the expression on his face was very tongue in cheek. And yeah, it was, you know, that's the thing about these bits, is they were really layered. You know what I mean? There was a lot going on,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just a lot going on, and in all these different modalities, right? Like I said, the physical and the musical, and in the delivery of the comedy and the timing, and, you know, it was really well crafted, you know, just really well crafted.
So what were some of the early memories you have of Ken? Because I have one memory of him, and that's it. That's all I got.
So, you know, he was a really sweet guy. You know,
Mhm.
what I remember was that he was always very sweet with me and with Mom and Gam. You know, he could get annoyed, but it, you know, he wasn't a scary guy at all. Like Dad could sometimes get a little scary when he would get angry, and but then Ken wasn't my dad; he was my uncle. So, you know, it's a
Yeah.
different perspective. But yeah, he was a very sweet man, and he was always cracking jokes, right? Just constantly making jokes in real time all the time, right? His wit never stopped, right?
Mhm.
He was always, you know, puns and double entendres, and yeah, he was just really fertile. And, you know, in addition to being a dancer, he also was a really gifted musician. He was kind of he could play, well, he played piano, harmonica, drums, trumpet,
Saxophone
sax, clarinet, all of those in the act at one time or
and
another.
guitar too.
And guitar, right?
Yeah.
Right. And he played the spoons. That was another thing, is that he'd take 2 tablespoons that were perfectly ordinary. I think he bent them a little bit so that their angles, the stems relative to the bowl of the spoon, was a little bent. But he would just clock them together, and he would play them like castanets, right? And that was another part of the act, is that to music accompaniment, he would play the spoons, and at the culmination of that bit, he would play the spoons against his cheek. He'd be tapping the spoons against his cheek with his mouth kind of open and forming kind of a cavern with his mouth. And Dad would put the mic right up to his mouth, and you could hear the, you know, that kind of popping reverberation of the spoons against his cheek cavity.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, his teeth would start to fall out again, right? That happened twice in the show, right?
So
and people love that, right? Because you'd already done it once.
it's a
Now he's
callback.
doing
Yeah.
it again, but a different cause, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was great stuff. Yeah, Uncle Ken was terrific. He would take me to the car wash in Dublin, and I have a lot of car wash memories. I even have a memory, you know, Kenny married a dancer, Aunt Sherry. They were only married a few years before they split up, but you know, she was a beautiful blonde, and I always was really fond of her. She was very sweet to me. And I just remember once I was with Uncle Ken and Aunt Sherry at a one of those automated car washes where you drive through and the car goes through several sets of brushes and rubber things hanging down, and you know, it's a process that takes about 5 minutes for the car to go through, right? And I remember Aunt Sherry, we were looking through the glass window, and she goes, "Look at all the attachments, right? Look at all the attachments." Right, the different brushes and things.
Mhm.
And I was just completely fascinated. She was too, right?
Mhm.
So, but yeah, that's very early. Like I said, I couldn't have been more than 3, if that. Right.
Mhm.
And
So-
we'd, yeah, Uncle Ken would take me to Casper's to get a hot dog, and I'm sure he would take Gammy a hot dog with just mustard.
I want just mustard.
Yeah, mustard only.
That's it.
Yeah.
Just a hot dog with mustard.
That's it. That's it. That's spot on, Gammy.
So what do you think were some of the early formative things that happened early on?
Formative for just me or our family?
Yeah. That made you the person that you are.
Well,
And Rachel, you
we've
can interject at any time.
We've been talking a lot about it already. I mean, for a very young child to be exposed to that world of adult entertainment, right? And this was not the Vegas of today where whole families go and there's all these different resorts with themes and there's something for every age. You know, the Vegas of the 50s, 60s, and 70s was strictly for adults, right? No kids. And so the shows, you know, the comedy was often profane, right?
Mhm.
And the dancers were often topless. And sometimes one of the acts would be a stripper number, just a whole number devoted to a woman who would slowly and gradually strip one item after the next, right?
Like a burlesque type thing.
Yeah. But, you know,
Yeah.
very artful, not really not that sexual, honestly.
Not like the body shop on Sunset Boulevard.
Probably not.
No,
No.
it's the burlesque dancing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, in fact, the show at the Holiday Casino that they did for 8 years. It was called the Holiday Casino's Wild World of Burlesque. That was its name. And so, yes, the dancing was burlesque style. And other acts in the show included jugglers, magicians. You familiar with the brothers Karamazov?
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with that? They are an East European acrobatics troupe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Dad and Ken worked with them once. I think at the Pleasanton Fairgrounds. They used to work fairgrounds and do shows. In fact, I remember in the 70s when we lived in Dublin, they did the Alameda County Fair at the Pleasanton Fairgrounds, and they opened for the Temptations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But the audience was almost everybody there was black, right?
Mhm.
And you get these two white guys, right, opening up for the Temptations
From Utah.
and the reception was pretty hostile, right? Because
Really?
yeah, they didn't want to see those two white honkies doing their, you know, they were there to. It was serious stuff, right? For a
Right.
bunch of folks, probably most of them coming from Oakland and other parts of the East Bay, right?
Mhm.
To hear the Temptations, you know, one of the great music acts of the time, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a little weird. I remember being in the audience, and it was just, I just observed that I don't remember them being. I remember there was maybe a little catcalling, and I don't think anything was thrown. And a lot of people just weren't paying attention, right? They were talking and just not paying attention. They were just waiting for the real show to start, right? And the brothers Karamazov I think that was one of those. I don't know. When I think about them, they were in an episode of Seinfeld, and sometimes my memories of when I was there kind of blurs with that
With
episode.
Seinfeld.
Yeah. So, but yeah, in fact, they wore these black bodysuits. They were just like leotards, basically. They were just black leotards, tight fitting from head to toe. And I think there were 4 or 6 of them, right? And they would do all these acrobatic things. And one of them approached me in between shows, and he said he wanted me to put on one of their costumes. And at the end, when they come out to the encore, that I would come out in one of their outfits, right?
Huh.
And I told him I couldn't do it.
You wouldn't
And
do
I
it?
was, yeah, I mean, I was, like I said, I was 6, 7 years old, maybe. But what I remember was they were pretty stinky, you know, because they were sweating and they were European and they didn't use deodorant, and they were very stinky to me, you know. And I just, back then, I thought I the idea of getting into one of their sweaty leotards, I just couldn't do it.
Well, that's reasonable.
Oh, so they want
Even
you
though
to
even though that was the thing, you ask about formative stuff. So what being around all that did for me is it inspired a desire to be a performer, to sing and perform myself, right? So as I got older, when there were opportunities to sing and perform, I would pursue them. But, you know, I didn't really go as far as I might have with any of that, because on some level, I felt that Dad wouldn't approve. And I remember once I told Dad that I wanted to take piano lessons, right? And he said, no, you're not going to do that. All piano players are, and I'm not going to say what he said, but you can probably fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, so I just got the impression that he didn't want me to do anything musical. So I never had any music lessons, right?
That's interesting. Did he give an idea of what he preferred you to be doing?
No, he didn't really care what I did. You know, that was the thing, is that he was, you know, when he was home, he was kind of in his own world, right? And he
Well, it's funny
not,
when you said he was gone a lot, I was going to say also when he was at home.
yeah, because he would withdraw and he would watch a lot of TV and he would do his thing, but he didn't invite me to share his likes for the most part. Like he loved football, right? But he didn't teach me about the game. He didn't sit me down next to him on the couch and teach me about the game. You know, it was something he enjoyed in isolation, right? And I wasn't really included. And so I never developed an interest in it, right? And what sports I did pursue as a kid, that was entirely Mom's doing, right? So the first kind of sport that I got involved with was judo. I took a judo class when I was 5 or 6 years old. Actually, it was one of the best in the class. I got an award. I was very good at judo. And then a couple of years later, Mom got me involved in soccer. I played soccer a little bit in Dublin. And then when we moved to Grass Valley, Nevada City, she got me involved in Little League and baseball, right? But, you know, that was all Mom. And I don't ever remember Dad even being at any of my my games, right? I just, I don't think he was in town when all that happened, right?
See, that's interesting, because I was going to ask you, because you know, that your parents split up pretty soon after Brian was born, right? Fairly, I mean, you know.
Well, not. Let's see. Brian.
It was 1984, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So Brian was about 6 when.
But you essentially grew up with both parents in the house.
Yes.
And I was curious to know, if your relationship with Bob was any different than Brian's, but it doesn't sound like it. I mean.
No, not really. not really. He was distant when he was home, and then, later in life, I learned that he had untreated mental illness, and he self-medicated by drinking, and he had a drinking problem. And so when he was drinking, he became somebody that we didn't want to be around, because sometimes he would get, verbally abusive.
Mean. He was a drinker.
He would tease cruelly, right? He always teased me, right? His nickname for me was Meathead, right? Like Archie Bunker, right?
Right.
You meathead, right? You meathead, just like
Imbecile.
Carol O'Connor, huh?
He would also say imbecile.
Yeah, he would say that sometimes too. But the one I really remember was Meathead. And I took it in stride because I knew he was just trying to be funny. But, it wasn't balanced with a lot of, if any, praise and compliment, right? So it was kind of out of balance. But so, yeah, what happened is I got older, because the pattern was when he would come home, he would be isolated, sullen, like I say, sometimes drinking and unpleasant to be around. And so I kind of, as I got older, I liked when he was gone, and I disliked when he came home, because when he came home, it would, a pall would fall over everything, and we were kind of walking on eggshells, right?
Get pulled and
yeah. And so, what the major turning point for Dad's career, of course, was that Uncle Ken developed serious mental illness, which manifested like schizophrenia. But the odd thing about that is that schizophrenia usually starts showing in men when they're teenagers, right? It doesn't usually.
It doesn't just appear out of nowhere in your middle.
Right. And when I talked to Mom and Gam about it, and I haven't talked to Dad a lot about it because he doesn't like to talk about that aspect of Uncle Ken's life. But all reports are that Ken didn't display those signs until late. And of course, by the time he started going in and out of mental hospitals, when I was, we had our last summer in Vegas after the 7th grade, and Brian was a year old. He went to Vegas with us that last summer. And then Uncle Ken couldn't work anymore because his mental illness progressed. And he'd gotten remarried to a woman who was an odd personality. And there was some speculation that she might have been giving him drugs, maybe acid or LSD or some kind of hallucinogens that aggravated his condition. Who knows? But
didn't she also have several other husbands that killed themselves?
Yeah, well, Mom told me once that Ken was her third husband that committed suicide, because that's what happened with Uncle Ken, is that he had been in the hospital. They hadn't worked for months and months. And then I was in high school by then. I think I was a sophomore, and they had not worked for maybe a couple years. And suddenly
they started up
better
again, though.
Yeah, and they were playing, doing a show in Monterey, and that weekend, Mom went with them. She didn't usually. She hadn't gone with them for years, but I guess for whatever reason, she decided to go with them on that trip. And you and I stayed with Aunt Helen and Uncle Kent in Grass Valley. And I'm repeating, what was the story that was told when you interviewed Mom in the podcast. But we just got, Dad and Mom got home. They came to pick me up at Helen and Kent's, but before they got there, Kenny's friend, a guy named Ray Solomon, Saul, had called and said that after the show, after they had parted, Kenny had brought a shotgun that he got out of Gammy's closet. It had been our grandfather's, and shot himself in the parking lot of the hotel where they were working, right? So he killed himself. And so that was a blow for Dad and Gammy, for all of us. And what happened then was that Dad wasn't working, and he had virtually no other work experience other than show business, right? He had a real estate license that he'd gotten somewhere along the way, and he tried to sell real estate independently, but this was back in the early 80s, and there was a recession going on, and interest rates were very high, and nothing was selling. So it was a terrible time to get into the real estate business. And so he just drank more and more and more, and he got more and more isolated and strange in his behavior. And then he and Mom, were having a more and more difficult time. So it all came to a head when I was a senior in high school, and that's when Mom, I think, basically told Dad that he had to leave, and he left, and he went to the Bay Area and moved in with Gam, and I hardly saw him for the next 5 years. So,
what the hell are you doing, Bob?
Yeah, right.
Can we just talk about Gammy for a second? Because I never got to meet her, but I love her. And
Yeah.
it's because you two do the funniest impression of her. And then Shane, you had the trunk, with a lot of family keepsakes. And you two are kind of the last of the line, really. And so I'm the only one who can see the photos and really, piece together. So I have this, I have all these photos of your family and of Gammy's life. So I feel like a kinship with her, because I feel like, I've been basically researching her for the last month or so, 2 months. And looking at all these photos and getting a feel for her and her family, and and where she came from, and she fascinates me. She sounds like she was such an amazing lady and so funny. And when you two talk to each other, when you call each other, you do Gammy, but I love it. It cracks me up every single time.
Well, she was a very funny lady. I mean, when you witness the comedy of Bob and Ken, a lot of that came from her, right? Her natural humor and witticisms. She was a comedian in her own right.
Yeah, one of my favorite Gammy quotes that I hear Brian say often is what it smells like. Bob said, it smells like a whorehouse. How would you know, Bob?
Yeah, happened? This happened in Pleasant Hill on Longbook Way, the apartments. I remember I was staying for the summer with Gammy, and Bob had walked in, and he goes, "Woo, smells like a whorehouse in here." Gam said, "How the hell would you know, Bob?"
Yeah, that's good. That's classic Gam.
And then she laughed.
Right. Right.
But it's interesting, though, because there is something there. I think part of where Ken and Bob's comedy came from was a tragedy that I don't think we're ever going to really know. And the reason I say that is because there was a story that Gammy would tell me when I was little about when her husband, our grandfather Jack, was teaching Gammy how to drive for the first time in like an old like Model T type car, right?
Right.
And and Gammy left the parking brake on while they were driving, and the way she tells it, you go, "Oh, your grandfather got so mad," and he went, "Oh, he got so mad at me," and then she'd start laughing. But I recently, I don't know how it happened. I started talking to Bob about it. I said, I don't know. We talked about the story about, Gammy leaving the parking brake on, and he told it totally differently. He
Sure.
said that when Gammy left the parking brake on, he backhanded her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I think, you know, it was a different time, and I think it was definitely probably more violent. And I think there is some tragedy there that we're unaware of. And there's another story that Bob told me about, I think him, our grandfather, and our father went hunting for quail.
Mhm.
And something happened where the police started chasing them, and our grandfather just outran them.
Right. I remember that story.
And so there's a lot of weird little things that I think, you know, that have come up only recently through conversations with Bob. And
Right.
it's kind of unearthing some of what their childhood might have been like.
Yeah. I think you're on to something there. And Jack Snyder died 5 years before I was born, so I never knew him at all. And
Right.
I don't remember Gam and Dad talking about him a whole lot. I think Mom said once that, you know, she knew him early in their marriage, and she said he was a strange man, but she didn't elaborate on that. My guess, though, what I do know about the Snyders is that a lot of there's a lot of mental illness in that family. There's a lot of different types of brain chemistry imbalance that manifest, and then often there's a lot of self-medication with drinking and drugs, and you know, presumably with the OCD that Dad has, the untreated OCD and the alcoholism, you know, it's possible that his father had those OCD tendencies too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just speculating here, but yeah, because all the Snyders that I know of at one time or another self-medicated with pills and alcohol, and Uncle Kent and his sister Millie, they were the youngest of the 10 Snyder kids, and they used to trade antidepressants, right? You know, Millie would have something that her doctor prescribed, and she'd give Kent some to try, and he would likewise give her some of his pills, you know, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So,
you
yeah,
know,
no doubt.
we do have one sociopath that's relatively famous.
That's true.
Rachel.
Who's that?
That would be Orrin Rockwell.
Oh, the bodyguard of Brigham Young or
That's
Joseph Smith?
right. Yep.
Yeah, you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, let me find him real fast on my little chart here. I've been working on your guys's you know, family chart for several months now, and it's very fascinating. I kind of went off of mine because yours is way more interesting than mine. But this is on Gammy's side, and hold on, let me pull them up. The Rockwells were a very prestigious family in the LDS, you know, world in Utah.
Okay.
And let me find Orwell. He was.
That's the Church of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah, and Letty, there's Letty. There's Letty, your great grandma Letty. You know who I'm talking about, right? Of course you do.
Letitia.
Oh, Letty.
Rockwell Stevens. So Orrin.
Mrs. Stevens.
Yeah. So Orrin Porter Rockwell is your guys' third great grandfather. And he's very terrifying and imposing looking. The show photo.
Can you describe him to those listening?
He has a very grumpy, frowny face, green eyes, and long, you know, biblical hair and beard, high forehead, very stern looking. And in some of the older black and whites, he looks, his eyes look really light, so he looks a little possessed and terrifying.
And your mom thought he was hot.
Yeah, yeah. Did she say that?
She did. She said he looked handsome or something.
You know, in a terrifying kind of way. Sure, I can see that. And this is an older photo of him. When he was gray, he had a long gray beard, very, very biblical, slightly bald, which obviously you guys didn't get any of. But he was the bodyguard of Brigham Young, and he was also a sheriff for a while, but also a hitman. He was a very intense guy.
And he killed like 100 people or something.
I think that's probably blown up a little bit, but he fathered 19 children by 3 wives.
And that's why we're both blind.
And that's why, yeah, because God smited you.
This is what God does.
Somewhere have the story of what he had done, but he was wanted for murder for a long time, and then suddenly became a sheriff instead, or something like that. But there's statues of him, and I mean, he's very famous in that world. Here, let me find the statue. Here's a photo of the statue. It's a big black epic statue of him with the bullet casings across his chest, and a woman clinging to one leg, and with children all around his legs, like clinging to him, and his beard is flowing. And apparently this statue is in Lehi Park, Lehi Park, somewhere in Utah. But yeah, that's
what state is that?
That's in Utah.
Oh, okay.
And that is, your third great grandfather on Gammy's side.
Yeah, because
so he was.
That would have been
Mormon.
That would have been her mother. Gam's mother. Her maiden name was Mabel Stevens. Is that it?
Stevens was a married name. She was married early, and then the husband died early, very young, and then she remarried. So
yeah, she was married Jack Murphy, and Jack Murphy was our grandfather.
Right, but she had a husband before that, that she had 2 children with, that died very young, in his 20s in the mines or something like that. So she was originally, her maiden name was Rockwell, and that would be her grandfather, Orrin would be, and he was called the Mormon Destroying Angel.
I'm gonna have to do a little reading up on him.
Yeah, I have some
interesting stuff.
Destroying Angel. That's just so intense for the Mormons, I feel like. But,
yeah. Well, they were. I mean, I can understand why. Again, he was the bodyguard of Brigham Young or Joseph Smith. Which one?
Both.
Joseph Smith.
Both, I believe. No, I think both of them.
Okay.
Both of them.
Yeah, because Brigham Young was killed in a massacre in Illinois, right? When they were on the way out from upstate New York, from Canada.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was probably around for that, and so it makes sense that they would have bodyguards. And given how they were treated as they made their way across the country, it makes sense that these men that defended the elders of the faith would be brutal about it,
Yeah. Well, on the way back to Illinois, when the church had relocated, he became the subject of an astonishing prophecy by Mormon leader Joseph Smith on Christmas Day of 1843. Smith said, as long as Rockwell remained loyal and true to his faith, he need fear no enemy. Cut not thy hair, and no bullet or blade shall harm thee. So I guess that's why he had the long locks. And Joseph Smith died in Illinois, and there was an exodus out of Illinois because of it. And it was during that time that Rockwell shot and killed Frank A. Worrell, who was a menacing Hancock County sheriff. And then he was deputized after that for some reason. But but then he became Brigham Young's right-hand guy as they crossed into Salt Lake in 1847. And then he was the territory's earliest lawman deputy marshal for the provisional state of Deseret in 1849. And
fascinating stuff.
Yeah, he's a famous big deal. He was involved in an attack on a half dozen Californians, and I think he killed a bunch of them. And he was indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder in that case, and nothing happened to him. He got amnesty from President Buchanan. Actually, what happened?
Oh wow!
Interesting. From the president.
Yep.
No less. Interesting.
Yeah. So I'll send you some of this. But yeah, you guys have a very fascinating history there. A lot of mining history, obviously. Your
right.
grandfather and uncles and stuff all worked here in the mines, and
right.
Many of them died young doing so. So there are a lot of women, running stuff because the men didn't stick around long because
Right,
they're
right.
getting miner's lung and stuff like that and popping off in their 30s. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, it's enough. 30 is enough.
30 is enough.
That's enough. Yeah, that's you don't need to go beyond that. So Shane, let's talk
Yeah.
about when you learned that you had Usher syndrome type 2A.
Well, I didn't even know about Usher syndrome until many, many years later, because I wasn't diagnosed with Usher syndrome initially. I was just diagnosed at UC Davis Med Center with RP, retinitis pigmentosa, right, when I was 16. So I didn't learn about Usher syndrome till years later. And when I found out that it involved congenital hearing loss, I assumed that it was Usher's, but I wasn't even certain of that until you went and had your DNA swab done, right?
Oh,
that
really?
was that was the confirmation of it. Yeah.
So you weren't sure until Brian was diagnosed.
Right. Right. I just assumed because it's of the two conditions going hand in hand and so on. But yeah, I learned about the RP when I was 16. Yeah.
And syndrome should indicate that it's a clusterfuck of diseases, because you have the eye, the retinitis pigmentosa, and then the hearing loss. So it's like a cluster of different things.
Yeah, you had those two things going on, and of course there are different types of Usher, and thankfully Brian and I have the type 2, which usually involves hearing loss that plateaus and doesn't diminish after a certain point, at least not very much, but the vision continues to go until it's gone. The type 1 Ushers, people can become profoundly deaf early in life, and then they lose their vision later, and then they're blind and deaf. So,
And
yeah,
which is interesting because Spencer Tracy, his son, had type 1.
Oh yeah.
And they have there's some kind of, I can't remember what it's the name, whatever his name is. There's a center in LA that's devoted to Usher syndrome in LA, and it's named after him.
Mm-hmm.
And or Spencer Tracy, I don't remember, but also ironically, that's Bob's favorite actor.
Spencer Tracy?
Yeah.
I don't recall him ever saying that. I thought Bogart and Cagney were his favorite actors.
Well, Humphrey Bogart is probably number 1, but Spencer Tracy is number 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he liked a lot of the greats of that era, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So how did you learn about it? What would you remember the first symptoms?
Well, my earliest memory around my eyesight being abnormal was when we still lived in Dublin. So I would have been no older than 7 at the most. But I remember being in the kitchen of the house, the duplex, our side of it. And Mom and Dad, we were in the dining room, and there was a light fixture over the dining room table. And I was standing there, and we were standing around the table, and Mom, Dad, one of them was noticing that the pupils of my eyes were very dilated, even though I was in this brightly lit room, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what was going on there was that I was already experiencing the night blindness aspect of RP. That's the first thing that happened with me, was the rods and cones start to go. And so the first thing goes is your night vision, right? And my eyes were reflexively trying to compensate by dilating the pupils to let in more light, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they noticed that very early on. And then the next thing I remember was, especially when we moved up to Nevada City, is we were living in the middle of the woods, and there were no street lights at all, none. And So at night, it could be very, very dark. On a moonless night, it was just black. And we didn't have a lot of houses around us. And we would walk, and I would wander off the shoulder of the road, and then have to get back on. And that always, puzzled Mom, and I guess Dad too. They noticed that I wasn't seeing normally. And I remember when I was in the 5th grade, I was playing hide and seek one night with some neighbor boys, and I was running to this big cedar tree that was base, and I ran into it full on at a full run.
Oh God.
And almost knocked myself out. I mean, it was one of those, I saw stars, there was a flash of gold and blue light, and I fell back on my back and almost was knocked out. And that's how it was. As it got dark, my eyes didn't adjust to the dark like other people, right? I had no night vision ever, right? I don't ever remember being able to see in the dark. So there was that. But as far as the actual diagnosis, what happened was so I was driving, I was 16, 17. I'm driving. Then Mom had a green Vega hatchback, a Chevy Vega, and that was the first car I drove. And I was out one night, and I was with someone, and we wanted to be alone so that we could do what teenagers sometimes do when they get alone, right? And so I drove the Vega into this back road in the woods that was very rutted and narrow. And in negotiating this road in the dark, there were Manzanita bushes on both sides of the car. And apparently I scratched the hell out of both sides of the car on the Manzanita bushes, but didn't know it. And so the next day when I came home from school, I walk up the driveway, and Dad was home, and he's down on his haunches with some car wax, and he's waxing the side of the Vega. And as I walked up to him, he goes, "What the hell did you do to this car last night?" Right? And of course, I didn't want him to know where I'd been, what I'd been doing. And so I, quick on my feet, said, "Oh, I can't remember what I said." But the problem was that I told one lie, and then later I was in the house, and Mom asked me about it, and I couldn't remember what I told Dad, so I told her a different story.
Oh no.
Yeah. I wasn't accustomed to lying. In fact, I think one of the things I remember at that time is I remember thinking when I told those lies, I think that's the first time I've ever lied to my parents. And it might have been. I was at least in my mind, I was a scrupulously honest kid, right? And lying to my parents just seemed like the worst thing in the world. But I did it because I thought I had to. And then later they compared notes, and they sat me down in the family room. They go, what happened last night? And again, I still didn't want to tell them the truth. So I made up a third story. But, and this was something that I would sometimes do in later years, is that I would try to, because I was so bad at lying, it showed on my face when I was lying, the guilt, that I would sometimes use a truth to cover a lie, right? To kind of misdirect.
Right.
And so I broke down and I said, well, I was driving up Idaho, Maryland Road, and I couldn't see, and I was driving off the side of the road and, scratching the side of the car. And then,
that should have been your first and only story. You should have just started there and ended there.
Hindsight is 20/20. No pun intended, right? So yeah, mom or dad or both said, well, that's it. We got to get to the bottom of what's going on with your eyesight. So they made an appointment for me with our local eye doctor in Grass Valley, and he took a look at my eyes and said, I think you guys need to take Shane to a specialist. And they made an appointment for me to be seen by a retinal specialist at UC Davis Med Center in Sacramento. So we drove down one day, and I was seen by the specialist and residents and interns, and that's when they told me that I had RP, and that it meant that I was slowly, gradually going blind. So.
Now, the first doctor, the ophthalmologist that you saw, Rachel now goes to his son.
Dr. Hegley?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Dr. Hagley Jr. is my doctor.
No kidding. Wow. He's probably a good doctor.
We both have bad eye issues. Not as bad as you two,
Okay,
but yeah. I have no depth perception because one of my eyes is much worse than the other one. So
okay.
You're running into the tree. I would run into car side mirrors and just not even see them because they just come right off of them.
Those treacherous side mirrors, yeah.
Flat on my back, yeah. A lot of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dr. Hagley is our doctor as well.
Okay. All right.
The new Dr. Hagley. And yeah, he's great.
Wow.
So how did you react to it when you learned that you had retinitis pigmentosa?
Well, I think there was some sense of relief in knowing what was going on, right? Because up to that point, I knew something's wrong, but I didn't know what.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as being concerned about vision loss, it just seems so far off. I mean, when you're 16 years old and you're thinking about going blind when you're 35 or 40, that just seems a lifetime away, right? And so it was pretty easy for me to shelve it and not be too concerned. I remember thinking that, well, by then they'll have a cure. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. I do know exactly what you mean.
25, 30 years from now, surely they'll have a treatment, right? So I just didn't worry about it. But of course, that night blindness really affected me in a lot of situations because, I went on to college and, when I got old enough to go to bars, I had a lot of trouble in bars because I couldn't negotiate bars very well. I'd be bumping into people, knocking drinks out of people's hands, stumbling over chairs and tables, and people would think I was drunk it was awkward, right? And it made it hard for me to socialize in a normal kind of way, and trying to explain it to people was tough because, it was such a unusual kind of thing, because my vision was normal and good light, right? And people that knew me didn't notice anything about my vision until I got into a low light situation, and then everything changed. So it was kind of hard for people to grasp that.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like you're being told that you're going to go blind by the time you're in your middle age, but that doesn't really explain what really is happening, because you're not just like fine and then suddenly at 40 it's gone. You're losing it gradually. So you're going through different stages of it, the whole time, right?
Yeah, and that's been the case for me. There's lots of different kinds of RP, and it manifests in different ways with different people. And in my case, it's always been very, very slow, but steady, right? Just very slow, but steady. And that continues, right?
Yeah.
And so the impairment that's come with that loss of vision has always, in the early days, before I began to learn how to adapt to life with less vision, it would creep up on me, and I'd find myself struggling, but not being aware that I was struggling, right?
Yeah.
being on a dark porch with no porch light and trying to figure out, which key is the one to open the door, right?
Right. And Brian,
stuff
hasn't that
like
kind of been your experience too? That it's, that you don't always notice, you don't always know exactly what it is until.
Yeah, I mean, especially the last 10 years, it's, things just creep up and then you suddenly realize, oh, this is a new thing that's happening. But, what I'm curious to know is how long did they say you would have useful vision for? What did your ophthalmologist say to you when you were 16?
They didn't project that because they didn't know, right?
Well,
Like I was saying, people with RP can progress quickly, they can progress slowly like me, or they can progress at one rate for a while and then lose a lot of vision more quickly and then level out and not lose any more. It's really pretty variable.
now
So
I
they
was
didn't.
told when I went to an ophthalmologist, when you and mom told me that I had retinitis pigmentosa, um, I asked him, I said, how long will I have? How much useful vision will I have and for how long? And he said into my 50s.
Yeah, and that all depends on how you define useful vision, right?
Yeah, well, when I meant was reading, driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's not something that anyone can predict with any kind of accuracy.
Yeah, and I was pissed about that he said gave a timeline because that did fuck me up in some ways.
Mm, yeah.
So,
So what oh, go ahead, Rach.
oh no, you could go ahead.
So what did you want to do? So you wanted to sing and you wanted to perform and you
Yeah,
went to
but like
use.
I said, I didn't feel encouraged to do it, right? And sometimes occasionally felt discouraged. And it's interesting because I had a talk with Dad. I remember Dad came to Sacramento once. Well, I was living in Midtown Sacramento, so it would have been about 25 years ago, back in the 90s, right? Mid 90s. And we were talking about this because at some point I had, gotten involved in some music and musical theater and of course the choral singing that I did uh, and the jazz stuff I did. Yeah, and we had a conversation about it, and somehow, I mean, basically, I don't remember exactly how it played out, but basically, he said, Sonny, I would have loved it if you'd pursued a performing career. And I was really taken aback. I go, really? I said, well, you certainly didn't make that known to me. I thought you didn't want me to do that. And he goes, absolutely not. But the thing of, as Dad's stories can turn on a dime, right? And I don't know how much of it is faulty recollection or just him dissembling, right? And I'm not sure, but yeah, I just remember being very surprised that suddenly he seemed very supportive of that. But yeah, I just didn't. I felt, and the other thing too was that Grass Valley, Nevada City, growing up there, it was yes, there was kind of an artsy side to the student body in the schools where I went, but that was kind of the nerdy and picked on crowd, and I didn't want to be nerdy and picked on, even though I was nerdy and I did get picked on. So I kind of, even though I identified with those kids and hung out with them, I also wanted to be liked and respected by the so-called regular kids, the jocks and cheerleaders and the popular kids. And so I was always trying to fit in, even though I didn't. And I think that's also some of the reason I kind of, for example, didn't say, get involved in drama in high school. That might have been something that I would have really enjoyed and done well at, but I just didn't. But and part of the reason I didn't do drama in high school is I think what happened was I got involved in the high school choir, and the Nevada Union High School Choir was a wonderful program. And so that became my musical outlet and my performing outlet. But I kind of envied later on, I envied some of my friends that were doing some of the drama stuff. And I wished later that I had, done some of the school musicals. But in college, I continued to do choral and other singing group stuff. And I did do a couple operas in college, and I liked that. So yeah, I mean, I definitely had my musical outlets, but I like to perform, and I like to do skits and comedy sketches for class projects or other things.
I
and
remember
I enjoyed that.
I remember you and Michael Hammond did the Ebony and Ivory, but you
Yeah,
did
the Lebanese and Israelis.
right.
Yeah. 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 So
That was timely.
yeah, that was part of every year they did a senior show called the Senior Follies. And it was mostly about lampooning the teachers and the administration and life at school. But the way we approached it, and I was in charge of it. But we had a lot of talented people that contributed, and we just did an amazing show. It was just hilariously funny. And of course, I had all of my experience, growing up with Dad and Ken to help me put that together. And it was modeled on Saturday Night Live, right? On the kind of sketches that they did, and the mock commercials and the musical interludes and the mockumentaries and stuff like that. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. I loved doing that show, and it was one of the highlights of my life, doing that and having it come off the way it did, because it was a big success. People loved it.
Was that when you were performing with my sworn enemy?
Who's your which sworn enemy?
The former mayor, Renette Senham.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah. She was in the show. She was in a couple of the sketches. She was very funny. Yeah, she definitely stole some scenes, as she's want to do, right? To this day, she's still a scene stealer, right?
That's true.
Yeah, she's very good at that. She's a master of stealing the show. Yeah.
And spreading COVID.
And also spreading COVID.
Well, somebody's got to do it.
Well, and she does everything with gusto, so.
Yes, that's right.
She's committed for sure, and should be.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So, did Rachel ever tell you that her father was kicked out of choir, and Rachel?
Yes. Yeah, she did. She told me about his run-in with a young Don Baggett when he was early in his career, directing the choir. Yeah, she told me about that. And then she also told me that when she joined choir, Don labeled her as a troublemaker and told her that she better stay in line, right?
Well, basically, my father, he hated my father had a beautiful voice, and he had sung in the church choir since he was 3 years old, but he was a giant pain in the ass, and I don't know what he did to get kicked out of the choir, but something. He wasn't at that school for very long. He was in continuation school before, in no time. And
right.
And I was, followed in his footsteps. But when I was in choir, I was in the California Youth Choir, and I did a lot of, I was in a lot of really high level choirs until I got into high school, and then I was in Baggett's class. And to be perfectly honest, I asked for it a little bit. I was rabble rousing about something. I believe, and it's so funny now that I'm, a grown up and I kind of understand a little better. I was complaining that all of our songs were all religious. They were all Christian, like not putting together that that's what choir is.
Right.
And he looked at my, he like looked at his face, he's like, James, you're not Mike James' daughter, are you? And I said, yes. And he's get out. He just kicked me out immediately.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing this again. Get out of my class right now. So I was causing trouble, and he was like looking up who I was, and I was like, oh, of course, yeah, another one out, go. Like he wasn't even gonna even try with me. He was done immediately. So
Wow.
yeah. And it didn't care about, my father or my voices. He couldn't care less. We could have been the most amazing singers, and he just didn't want to deal with our shit at all, which is valid.
So let's
Must
get
have been
back.
very traumatic for him and then for you.
He obviously was affected by whatever my father did in his class. The look on his face was just like, oh no, not again.
Yeah.
And I kind of was like, smarmy about it, because I was smarmy, very smarmy at the time. So I was kind of sad because I did love to sing, but not God's songs. Why are we doing that all the time in choir?
Right. Right.
So I want to get back. You mentioned being nerdy. And I think you know where I'm going with this.
Well, I don't know. There's so many incidents.
Where are you going?
No, I mean, I think there, astronomy has been a very
oh, I know where you're going.
large part of your life. And you had a telescope, and I remember that, in high school, you'd always be looking at the stars. And where did that love come from?
Star Trek. Yeah, it came from Star Trek. When we first moved up to the house in Nevada City, I had come from the Bay Area where we had cable TV, and I watched a lot of TV. And my after school afternoons, the lineup was, let's see, Kimba, which was a cartoon about a white lion in the African belt, and Speed Racer, and the Three Stooges, the Little Rascals, other shows, Gilligan's Island, Brady Bunch. And then we moved up to Nevada City, and initially, there was no cable up there. So Dad put up, I think we had rabbit ears he had a little blue, like a 10-inch TV.
Well, I remember there was one of the old like antennas with the, had all the, I didn't know how you describe what it looks like. It just was, it had all.
It's the kind you put up on your chimney.
Right. Yeah.
That it's aluminum, and it has,
spokes
it's like a double-sided comb. It's got these aluminum teeth, and but we didn't have that in the beginning, and I think we just had. Anyway, my point is, our TV reception was really limited up there in the beginning. And I remember coming home from school in the 3rd grade and looking for something to watch after school. And the little blue TV in the kitchen was, in the dining room was, I could just pick up on channel 40, Star Trek. And that was my first exposure to Star Trek. So this is 1974. Star Trek had been off the air about 5 years at that point. The movies, the first feature film that came out in 76, I think. And so Star Trek was brand spanking new to me, and it was kind of like all I had to watch. And so I started watching it. And then I happened to meet up with a kid that lived not too far away from us. And he was really into Star Trek. And he had the Star Trek bridge with the transporter transporter pad in the corner, and then the action figures of Kirk and Spock and the rest of the crew. And he had a real Star Trek. He had a Kirk tunic with the insignia, right, and the gold stripes around the wrist. Yeah. So between watching Star Trek and having my first real friend up there be really into Star Trek, that's kind of where it all started. And so I love the concept of going into outer space and traveling to other worlds and meeting different aliens, and I just that became a mainstay for me. And in fact, in the fourth grade, I asked Mom to make me a Spock costume, so a blue tunic with the the black nylon pants and some black boots, and I had gotten one of those AMT model kits, and one kit had the tricorder communicator and phaser, right? And I put those together and put the decals on them, and then I had Mom. She got I don't know where she got it, but she found a black wig, and she trimmed it so that it approximated Spock's haircut.
It was probably like a Betty Page wig.
Something like that. Yeah, yeah. And I just have to, as an aside here, I have to say, Mom she was just over the top amazing when it came to Halloween and hand making these incredible costumes for me.
And cakes too. Didn't she make a Star Trek cake?
Yeah, she was really, she always went all out to make those kinds of occasions for me really special. And like I said, the handmade Halloween costumes and the the custom made to my order birthday cakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just
I remember
really,
there was a photo of it was the Starship Enterprise on the cake.
right, firing phasers onto the planet.
Nice.
And twin icing phasers. So yeah.
Now I have a question that I was really curious about, because my boys are they're actually 15 years apart. They're even farther apart than
right.
And something that your mother and I talk about a lot is how our children had very different mothers. I mean, the mother I was,
right.
My older boy is I was in my 20s, and now I'm in my 40s, and so it is a completely different. I mean, I don't know which one had it better or worse, but for whatever reason. But I don't have the energy I had when I was younger, but I also have way more
Sure.
patience than I did, or whatever. So do you guys feel like you had very different versions of your mom?
Gosh, that's a really good question. It's not something I've ever thought about. What do you think, Brian?
Well, you would know, because I don't know what you had, but you could probably guess based on what you had and what you saw. I will say it's interesting that you say this, Rachel, because I remember when Bob told me the story about his father backhanding Gammy.
Mm-hmm.
In that same conversation, I would talk about how Gammy was so funny and stuff, and he said, the Gammy that you knew, is not the mother I had.
Right.
Did he elaborate on that?
No.
Well, I mean, the father that I had was not my children knew a very different person than I did. He mellowed out. So, he was very unbelievably strict with me, but with my kids, he just whatever, he's trying to give them buckets of candy, and I'm like, they haven't had dinner. He's like, oh, mommy's so mean, where he would have slapped it out of my hand if I had. So it makes sense generationally like that, but I mean, that's the thing about having children, when you're in two completely different stages of your life, is you are a different person. 23-year-old me and 40-year-old me are nothing alike.
Right.
and my kids are very different too from each other, and you two are as well. So, but you know, I think one thing that I think about a lot with you guys is it must have been so frightening for her with you, Shane, to not have any idea what was going on with the Usher stuff and just have to muddle through it, and have no clue what's happening. Then with Brian, maybe having like at least a chart to work from, or you know, a foundation of experience. Right. And how she handled it must have been very differently. And both of my children have similar neurodivergent issues, so it's been easier with my younger one to be, just because it's not new. Like when I started seeing signs of something, I knew right away what it was, as opposed to being not even noticing or being like, why isn't he tying his shoe? Like not knowing what was going on with him until much later. With the younger one, I'm like, oh, I know what that is, and I was able to suss it out earlier, and it wasn't so mysterious or scary. And there wasn't the guilt of later, like with my older boy, I have so much guilt around trying to make him do things he couldn't do. And I just didn't know, you know, and I had, he has motor skill issues from he's on the spectrum, he has Asperger's, which they're not calling it that anymore, but you know, he's high functioning autism, but he could not tie his shoes to save his life. And I don't know how many times I'm like, what's the matter with you? You know, like, how hard is it? And his handwriting was atrocious. And I would, as a punishment, I'd make him write sentences. And I didn't realize later on, I found out he had dysgraphia, and it was like physically painful for him to write. And I felt awful. I mean, just not knowing. And then with the little one, it's a lot easier, because instead I have already learned not to, you know, assume they're just not doing something and actually, you know, ask what. But I wonder if, you know, Judith had similar things with you guys, and if that affected your relationship with her, or just, you know, I don't know, I'm just pondering, because that's one of our similarities that I've been, you know, that we've noticed.
Yeah, well, I think there's no question that people change as they age and as they encounter new and different life experiences. And so, yeah, there's no way that Brian and I would have identical experiences vis-a-vis our mom, right?
Sure.
But I will say that there is a certain constancy to mom. You know, certain values that she holds very strongly. You know, her love for her children, and her work ethic, and her caring for the community around her, right? Her generosity, her willingness to help others. And just, you know, that giving and generous spirit that you know, draw.
Oh, we just lost your sound, Shane.
Part of her, it still is. So, you know, when I think about mom, I think about how.
Hold on a second, Shane.
She had to.
It sounded like it drastically changed.
Undergo all these big life changes and challenges, like we all do in our lives, right? And some of them pretty extreme and hard to bear. And you know, I think about how those things, you know, shaped her. And but like I said, parallel to that, there's a certain consistency in her outlook and in her being that you know, I feel have been there all along and still are. You know.
Yeah.
Hey Shane, can you hear us? I don't think he can hear us.
You can't hear us. He can't hear us.
I think his audio disconnected.
Yeah.
Are we still on the air?
Yeah, we are, but your audio's disconnected. Can you hear us?
He can't. Yeah, he can't. But he just realized it. He got up and he's messing with his phone. So yeah. Hi, Brian Snyder.
Hi, that was a good question.
Thank you.
You know, I think, you know, I echo what he said. She is very consistent about making the best of everything.
I think you guys maybe can still hear me. I couldn't hear you for a bit.
Yeah, you're back now. your audio, whatever, how your audio.
I just heard you through the, hold on a second. Hi.
And one second. One second. There you are. There you are. I hear you again. So
Your
you know
video
what
is
happened?
gone.
Your Bluetooth disconnected?
Well, did you lose me?
Well, we could hear you, but the audio changed. So whatever audio setup you had, it disconnected.
Hold
And now
on a
your
second.
video's off.
Okay, I'm
Oh,
gonna.
wait, hear you.
I'll tell you what. Will you guys just give me just about 30 seconds, and I'll be right back.
Sure.
And you can entertain the troops while I'm gone for a moment,
Yes,
and I'll be
sir.
right back.
Is this a military show?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I want to hear some I want to hear some black flag covers when he gets back.
So what's up, Rachel?
Oh, nothing. Not much. No, I'm enjoying listening to Shane. You know, I've heard a lot of these stories, but not from Shane's.
Are you like, you're like enough already?
No, I'm very interested in all of it. And you know, while he was talking about, while you guys were both talking about Bob and Ken, I was pulling up pictures from their shows and video clips and stuff. So that was fun. That's why I was being so quiet, because I was doing visuals for people watching YouTube.
You're multitasking.
But yeah,
That's
well, I mean, I don't have much
ADHD.
to add to that
ADHD
part.
multitasking.
I have to be doing something with my hand, and you know, who knows what I'd be doing if I didn't have that to do. But I've been adding some visuals.
What does that
to your,
mean?
to your blind guy show. Something weird. Don't make it weird.
So you want to hear something? Speaking of weird, so I went to a therapist early on in our relationship, and oh, hold on a second here. Let me
Was
get
it
back.
Ryle therapist?
Yeah. It was the one you recommended, and so I started talking, and I was like, saying like, you know, it's so odd, you know, Rachel and I met on a blind date basically, and it's not like we met, you know, it's not like I saw her or I couldn't see you, but it's not like you came to me or we saw each other across a crowded room type situation and we're drawn to each other. And I was saying, and I was saying, you know, it's odd how he's coming back.
Well, I think you should finish the story, because that's fine, because I have a funny adding to it, because I know where you're going with this.
So what I was saying was telling the therapist, I'm like, there's a lot of parallels that with Rachel and my mom. And I said, that's very odd. And he's like, yeah, it's that's how it works. And I'm like, wait a minute.
You say that's a little creepy. You're right.
Well, he was just like, yeah. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense, because it's not it's not like
because you weren't drawn to each other necessarily. We were thrown together. Like
yeah. And yeah. So that's why I thought it was odd.
Well, then
are you back, Shane?
I'm back. Sorry about that, guys.
That's all right.
Well, but then I
get
started
the
working at the
video back.
mortuary, and I had the blue hair, and I had to change it because I needed to not look like a weirdo. And so I just took it like darker, and I went red, and you were like, I don't like that. Remember that?
Yeah, because my mother has
and
red hair.
And I thought you're all, it reminds me of somebody. And I was like, oh, what ex do I, you know, is this? And then I was like, oh. I think it was right around the same time you were seeing that guy. So that makes
yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah.
So we're back.
I have been streaming the audio through Bluetooth hearing aids that I'm wearing.
Mm-hmm.
And these are new hearing aids, and I'm still getting acquainted with how they work. But the battery went dead in the right ear, and that severed the Bluetooth connection.
Classic phonak.
Yeah, classic phonak. Yeah.
The hearing device saga.
So, was there anything else you wanted to add? Because what I was just saying to Rachel is, with mom, one of the things is consistent about her is her ability to try to make the best of any situation. And
yes, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
And so I mean, she does she does it to this day. You know, she's trying to, you know, make everybody have a little joy in their life, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So Star Trek. I want to go back to this again. So, was there ever a time? Now, two questions I want to ask. You were drawn to Spock. Why? First of all,
Yeah.
and second, did you ever have a thought of going into the sciences?
Yeah, good questions.
I'm sorry. Before you start, I'm going to step out for just 1 second. So go, please. But by all means, I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right. So that outfit that Mom put together for me, the final touch was that through a mail order catalog, I ordered a set of rubber Spock ears.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I put on this get up, right? And I'm in the 4th grade, and I just decided to go to school wearing that, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not a dress up day at school. It wasn't anything, you know, it's just an ordinary day. And there I am, you know, going to the bus stop with all these redneck kids dressed as Spock with the hair and the ears and the outfit and the gear.
How old were you?
4th grade.
Okay.
And then I made it to school and made it to class. And then the first recess, I was out on the playground, and some 5th graders came up to me, and they ripped off my wig and ripped off my Spock ears and my tricorder and stomped on my tricorder and communicator. And
That's
yeah,
horrible.
so, oh yeah, it was very traumatic. But but you know, there was 2 things about that. It's like when I look back on that, I think, why did Mom let me go to school dressed like that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she may have just thought that people would find it entertaining, you know, and that's why I did it. I wanted to, you know, show my love of Star Trek and Spock and get some attention in the process, but I was very naive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, by then, I mean, I'd had so many run-ins with, like I said, these rural roughneck boys that made up most of the, you know, that were my classmates and neighbors. And, you know, I'd only intermittently had opportunities to socialize with other kids my age, because so much of my childhood I was on the road, traveling with adults and socializing with adults and participating in adult entertainment, right? So I was way ahead of my peers in terms of my understanding of the adult world, right? But I didn't have a very good grasp of the world of kids, right? Especially when I went to Grass Valley, Nevada City, because, you know, that I'd come basically from the city, from the suburbs, and it was just a whole different world, and I didn't get it. I didn't get it, and it didn't get me. And so there were, you know, there were instances where I clashed with others, you know. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to be liked, and I wanted to, you know, be funny and entertain people, but I just, you know, I didn't know how to do it effectively. And I spent years trying to figure it out. You know, how do I make my classmates laugh? How do I entertain them? How do I make them like me? Right. And sometimes I was successful, you know. You know, I remember doing a play in the 8th grade where I played this king, and I decided to put on these tights and kind of be a flaming king, you know, a lot of gay innuendo and you know, I got teased for it, but the kids also appreciated it. They laughed, you know, they thought it was funny. So yeah, I was kind of walking this line between ridicule and some acclaim, you know. It was kind of like they were both mixed together. You know, it's like I was appreciated, but I was also kind of scorned at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, by the time I became a senior in high school, being in the choir had given me access to some of the kids that I felt I wanted to, whose circle I wanted to be in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was always on the edge. When I did hang with the more popular kids, I was still kind of the odd man out, even though I was kind of, quasi accepted and appreciated. It was a real mixed bag. And then by the time we got to my senior year and I did the senior follies, that was kind of my triumph, because, I had, written so much of the show and put so much of it together. It was kind of my vision. And like I said, there was a lot of talent, a lot of really talented folks that were involved, including Renette. She was very, very good at what she did. And, we put on a great show, but it was kind of like this, like I said, this kind of this triumphant moment where I felt I was finally getting appreciated in a way that I wanted to be appreciated.
Now,
So,
did any of those? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as far as, Star Trek led to an interest in astronomy. And so in 7th grade, I'd ask mom and dad for my first telescope. And as you mentioned, I used to go out at night and look at the moon and the planets and the stars. And I struggled with that because although I could, at the time, I could locate stars, brighter objects I could locate in the telescope and appreciate, but fainter objects like nebula and, galaxies, I couldn't, I just couldn't see them. They were too faint. My eyes, I couldn't pick them up even through the telescope. So I always wanted a bigger, more powerful scope so I could see those things. But, and I thought that I would, pursue astronomy as a career. But what I learned by the time I was getting ready to go to college, what I learned was that astronomy was less about looking through telescopes and more about, calculating equations, right? It was about the math and the physics. And those weren't my strong suits. I was never a natural at math. I always had to struggle at math. And even though I love science, the more abstract elements of it, I had trouble grasping. And I just realized that I probably wouldn't be successful if I pursued that. So I just kind of abandoned it. And, but I never lost my love of all things extraterrestrial, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, why were you drawn to Spock in Star Trek?
I think because Spock was like me. He was kind of a cerebral guy, introspective, a deep thinker. But he was also a heroic character. He was courageous and selfless and cool under pressure, cool under fire.
Mm-hmm.
So he had qualities that I felt I lacked, that I kind of aspired to.
Mm-hmm.
But we also shared certain attributes, right? Being the outcast, being the odd one out. So I think that was it, But what's interesting is that, I've always been kind of divided in the sense that there's a part of me that's really outgoing, the one that likes to get on stage and sing and perform and crack jokes and be the center of attention. And then there's another side that really appreciates just drawing back and being alone and creating my own worlds of, of fantasy and speculation. And, of course, I always read a lot, just devoured books all through my childhood, all kinds of books, science fiction, mystery, historical fiction. So yeah,
Now, speaking of writings, you wrote a story that was going to be made into a movie.
Well, yeah, I did write a short story some years back, and a friend of mine, Matthew Callahan, who's a budding filmmaker and has made a few films, and he liked the story, and he and another person that he collaborated with turned it into a script, and he never was able to get funding for that project. So it kind of gets put on the shelf, and then every few years it gets dusted off and taken off the shelf. And he was talking not that long ago, sometime in the last year, about reworking it and giving it another try. So I don't know if it'll ever get made into anything. But the story has gotten a lot of mileage just in terms of, attention. And
Can you share just the basic premise of it?
yeah, the story is called A Hairy Situation, and it's a science fiction story, of course. And it's about two aliens that are sent to Earth to collect specimens and do scientific research clandestinely. And they are, your card-carrying, grotesque, tentacled, horrific, physically aliens. And they come to Earth, and they sometime in the course of their explorations, one of them discovers that ingesting human hair has a euphoric effect. So for these aliens, ingesting human hair makes them high.
Mm-hmm.
And so to capitalize on this, they disguise themselves. They have the ability to make themselves appear human. So they use that technology to appear as two young female hairstylists that open up a salon in San Francisco. And so they use this as a front for their hair harvesting endeavors, and then hijinks ensue. Right. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. It really is. I hope it is made into a movie at some point.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because as happens, and you've been around the industry enough, the filmmaking and entertainment industry enough to know that what happens is that, it was turned into a script, but when I read the script, I hardly recognized my story, right?
Yeah.
It had been turned into something very, very different, and and that's okay. You know what I mean? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's I was flattered that people like the story, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that they like it enough, they might want to use it in that way. So that was all fine with me. But yeah, the film it would be made into would be something very different than my original concept. But that's showbiz.
Right. Hey, Rachel, are you back? No, I guess she left. I was going to ask her if she heard that story, but so what was I going to ask? How are you doing on time?
Oh, you mean, is it my bedtime yet?
Yeah, is it?
Oh yeah, it's way past my bedtime. I'm almost afraid to see what time it is. It's got to be after 9 o'clock, right?
Let me see. It's 9:32. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
yeah.
But
way past my bedtime.
We've covered a lot of stuff, but I feel like we have a lot more to cover. And
so there's going to be a sequel?
Yeah, we can definitely we can definitely continue this, and just maybe we can, have it an ongoing thing. One of the things, just hearing you talk, I think I'm really thinking that you should have a podcast.
Well, not something that I've given any thought to, but I appreciate the idea. Maybe something will come of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this, when I started this thing, it started out very differently, and I had a very like contrived like idea of what I wanted it to be, and it turned into something else.
Right.
And I mean, it really just kind of became something that I needed to do to feel alive and connected. And
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and it's been really a wonderful experience to connect with old friends and people that I haven't met, and learn who they are, and
Right.
explore their lives. And yeah, I think I really hope that you consider doing something like this.
Well, I may just do that now that you've put it out there. It's an intriguing idea, and I thank you for inviting me on. I wasn't sure what to expect, even though I've watched quite a few episodes of your podcast, and I enjoyed the interviews. And you have such an amazing array of personalities that have been a part of your life and are a part of your life, and people from so many different walks of life, and really accomplished, thoughtful folks. And so yeah, you've got no shortage of fantastic subject matter, right, at your
Yeah,
disposal.
yeah. Thank you. Gustavo, Gustavo Esteva, who's
Yeah.
my friend and mentor. One
Yeah.
of the things that he mentions, and he said this to me, because when I was living in Mexico, I was super depressed. I was really, I was, making that transition from, not using a cane to starting to use a cane, and getting into that phase where the sunlight is too bright and the shadows are too dark. And I was really, it was a very scary time. And I remember, I was miserable in so many ways, and he knew it. And one of the things that he was trying to encourage me to do is to do something like this, and to do something creative. And I didn't really believe in myself and at all. I was just so lost in misery. And he had a very close friend who was a writer. His name is Ivan Illich, and
I've heard of him.
yeah, um, he's written some books like Deschooling Society, and I know, Disabling Professions. And anyway, the point is that they had a very close friendship. And one of the things that Ivan Illich said to him was, when I see myself through the eyes of my friends, then I know who I truly am.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me, because when I was with Gustavo, I couldn't, I mean, he was showing me who he thought I was. And it was really hard to accept, because of what I was experiencing with my vision loss. And so this process has been, I didn't think it was going to become that, but it has. I'm beginning to see myself for who I am through the friends that I've had conversations with here. Yeah. And
I think you're on to something there. That perspective is very revealing.
yeah. Yeah. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know I mean, it's definitely evolved from where it started. And, if I wasn't so exhausted all the time, I I think I think it could definitely improve in a direction that I want to go.
Sure.
But anyway, thank you so much for being here on the 50th episode. I feel like we've only scratched the surface, and I want to continue these conversations when you have time,
Absolutely.
because
Yeah, I'd
there's
like that.
there's so much we have not discussed. And
Right.
um, I'm thinking maybe we should create like a segment that's, you and I just having conversations, because um, there's so much ground to cover that we haven't talked about, and
Sure.
especially the
Sure.
parallels of our loss, and
Mm.
how it affected us in different ways, how it affected us similarly. I can't even say that.
You know, I finally put my finger on who you sound like tonight.
Who's that?
You sound just like Cloris Leachman's nurse Diesel in Anxiety. Yeah, you're kind of slurring your words. Kind of
no,
talking a
no
little bit.
fruit cup.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
dinner will be served promptly at 8:00. Those tardy will not receive fruit cup.
Yeah, I maybe it's probably it's really smoky here,
Yeah.
and it's probably affecting my sinuses for sure.
Yeah. I
And I'm
think
just
so.
and
You're
tired.
tired.
Yeah, I've been
It's
up
been a
since
long,
4:30, so
a long day. Yeah, I get it.
but yeah, I think we should, try doing a segment that I'm not sure what it's going to be called or what it is, but I think we have a lot to discuss.
I would be delighted to do that with you.
Well, thank you. Well,
Yeah, thank you.
Rachel, are you back? Wow, she just totally disappeared. All right, man. Well, listen, thank you so much for being here. It was really an honor and a pleasure. And I mean, this is the 50th episode. I've made it. We've made it. And is there anything that you would like to promote or share, or anything that you'd like to say before we disconnect?
Only that again, I've appreciated this opportunity to spend this quality time with you and Rachel. And it's no secret that I may be I'm certainly one of Rachel's biggest fans. She's just an extraordinary individual, and I'm so glad you guys found each other. It's just been delightful to have her as part of our family. So,
Well, I walked right in right at the best time.
yeah, you sure did. Yeah, totally unscripted too.
She's coming. But
I think she was there the whole time, just on her phone, but she was waiting for this part of the conversation.
I was waiting for the Star Trek part to end.
Right.
No, the baby's father was blowing the phone up, and I was worried, and it was about his eye appointment today. Interestingly enough.
Is he okay?
He has apparently, if it's being understood correctly, I'm going to call him tomorrow. Make sure apparently he's very farsighted in one eye and nearsighted in the other, and neither eye are tracking properly. So he is getting his first pair of glasses in about 10 days.
Really? Oh. So it's like your condition.
Yeah, very similar to mine.
So I mean, what is that called?
Bad eyes. I don't know. I don't know, but when I was 3, they noticed it in me when I was 3, and I was sitting really close to everything, and they thought there was something, wrong with me mentally, I guess. And I was falling over things. I was constantly running into stuff and falling over stuff, and so they figured out I needed glasses at about 3, and then in the first grade, one of my eyes was much stronger than the other, and so they put an eye patch over the strong one to kind of force the weak one to work, because they said if I didn't do that, and it didn't strengthen the weak eye, that eye would eventually die and not work anymore at all. So they're saying the same thing about the little guy. And wearing glasses, like big bottle cap, like glasses that magnify your eyes really big on top of an eye patch, is not, speaking of nerds, not very socially helpful. So
these days, the way they're constructing glasses, it's a lot. I think it's a lot more subtle than back in our day.
Yeah. My glasses back then were, they were so thick that they hung really far off out of both sides of the frames and left giant, red marks on my nose. And
Yeah.
I still
remember.
have big owl eyes. Like my
Yeah.
glasses make my eyes huge.
Yeah.
But when they finally came, with the glass that's super thin or the plastic, I guess that, doesn't weigh like 5 pounds each lens. It's been quite an improvement. So yeah, he's getting himself some. I think it's going to be cute. It was inevitable. There's no one in his family that has good eyes. So
I think he would like an eye patch, though. I think he'd be into that.
maybe, yeah. I have some he can borrow. I actually have a stash of them somewhere. Pirate party. Long story.
So Rachel, we were just wrapping her up.
Okay.
And was there anything you'd like to? I was just saying that I think Shane should have his podcast. I think he would be awesome if he. I'm not sure what the theme would be. If it'd be Star Trek.
I think you guys should go to together. Be at vaudeville. Let's go to Vegas. I'll be your agent.
Vaudeville Vegas.
Yeah, well, we could revise the Snyder Brothers routines. Yeah, that's one possibility.
Two blind brothers. I don't know. We'll think of something.
Yeah.
The blind Snyder Brothers.
Yeah.
The Blinder Brothers.
The other brothers. The Snyder other brothers.
The other Snyder Brothers.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I always have a million questions for Shane. I really, Shane and I think get along very well, and I really enjoy talking to him. But we don't have all night, so another time.
Yeah. Until the next segment.
Yeah.
All
right. I love you, Shane. And
I love you, Brian. I love you too, Rachel.
I love you too. And you know what? I did want to tell you really quick that that you're part of our TikTok stardom that we're working on.
Oh yeah, because sweeping the floor with the kid.
Yeah, that was yeah. And I have like kind of circus music behind it, and we weren't really sure how Shane would get along with the little guy, but they're fine. Yeah, you're dragging him, and then you finally kind of shake him off.
Mopping the floor with Nico. Yeah, that's a great memory.
Thousands and thousands of views, that one.
Amazing.
Very popular. So
wonderful.
And if you'd like to view it, you can go on TikTok, The Exhausting Snyders. You can find us there and rate, like, subscribe, and also rate, like, subscribe this. And if you don't like this, send this to your opposing political party. Whatever you can do works. So, all right, everybody.
24,000 views, Shane.
Wow. And climbing.
Sorry. Okay.
All right, everybody. This is The Blind Man in Black. I am your host. I'm here with my wife, Rachel Snyder, co-hosting, and our very special guest for the 50th episode, Shane Snyder, my brother. Thank you so much for being here. Have a lovely evening, and everybody be kind and peaceful to each other, and we'll reconnect soon.
And live long and prosper. That's right.
Perfect. All right. Now our awkward ending.
Beam me up, Scotty.